Welcome back to Self-Host Sundays, and if you remember all the way back when we set up our media server, we very briefly touched on profiles and custom formats. Now, if you're like me, at this point when you first start building a media server, you might notice that those drives might be getting a little bit full. So how do we handle quality and profiles? Let's take a look at quite a relatively new app in the media stack, however, one that I can't live without. Let's take a look at Profilarr. Okay, so let's look at quality, profiles, and custom formats. Now, I've got just a few movies that I've added here. If I change my view to table, and then I go to my options, and I add my size on disk column, you can see how much these movies take up. Now, obviously, for the ones that haven't yet released, they are 0. I've got Night of the Living Dead, which is 16.2 gigabytes. And then I've got everything from kind of 7, got some 2s there. But you'll notice that they are still technically Blu-ray 1080p. So even though I've got Super Mario Galaxy at 1.8 gigabytes, at Blu-ray 1080p, I know that that bitrate is going to be pretty terrible. So even though the resolution's there, the quality might not be. So this is where quality, profiles, and custom formats come into play. These can be quite annoying to manage manually. There is a site called Trash Guides, which provides some really great information on setting up those profiles. However, we're going to use a relatively new app called Profilarr. And what this will do is it will connect to Radarr and Plex, and it'll allow us to sync profiles based on our specific wants and needs. So here is Profilarr. It's available again on GitHub. So you can see here it comes with our Docker Compose YAML there, so we can just copy and paste this. We don't need that parser bit because that's for just some testing, but we can take everything up to there and pop that in. We'll also see we've got some environment variables there, so I don't believe we need any of those. Nope. So this is what you'll see on most GitHub pages, is you'll see a description of what the variables are and then what the default method is, which is always very handy, especially when it comes to things like ports. Okie dokie, so I'm going to take just this Profilarr bit down to there. I don't need the services bit because it's already in there. We're going to jump over to, and then I'll go back to my Compose. So we're still in our media server project. So this is why we use projects in Dockers, because otherwise you'd have all these different apps and it gets a little bit messy, especially like when I covered last week when we've got Bazaar, which works alongside Flare Solver, Open Subtitle Scraper, and Subgen. It's easier just to keep them all in a nice little neat project. So we're going to go back to our Compose configuration. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. I'm just going to nudge that networks thing down a bit and keep it at the bottom. I'm just going to add a little comment here and we'll say Episode 3, Quality and Profiles. Make a new line. I want to paste in my Profilarr Compose that I've just nicked. So you'll see that it's giving me a bit of an error. So I mentioned a few episodes ago about white space, and this is where it gets very annoying. So I'm going to tab, and then we do have to do some fixes. Don't know why that's shouting at me there. All mapping items must start on the same column. So you can see here that it's not quite on the same column. So the easiest thing to do to fix this quickly is you can just scroll down and then I'm just going to hit space a couple of times to tidy it up. I will also advise a way to deal with this is if you've got a Docker Compose that's getting a bit messy, then provided you've not used any passwords or anything, you can always stick it into a ChatGPT or Claude or something, and then it will tidy it up for you. So I can see that my Profilarr isn't level. And there we go. So for a YAML file, this is quite simple. We've got obviously Profilarr, which is the name of the service. We've got our image, which is going to pull from Dictionary Hub. And then we've got our container name. We've got our port, 6868. We've got our volumes. So I did mention, it was either last episode or the episode before, about dot will basically treat it as self. So it'll go inside your own folder, use the config folder. But we've not made a config folder yet. So what I'm going to do, just to keep things nice and neat, is it will be /volume 1/docker/media server/profilarr. And then I'm going to need to go in a moment and make sure that I've created that folder. Because remember, you cannot mount something that doesn't exist. Tell that to my teenage self. So PUID is 1000, PGID will drop to 100 because that's the ones we had from our first episode. And then the time zone is etc. UTC is technically the same time zone as me, but just for consistency, I'm going to use Europe/London. If you want to get your local time code, the best resource is there is a Wikipedia page here, which has a list of all the time zones. So last but not least, we're going to create that folder. So shared folder, Docker, media server, and Profilarr. So now that's good to go. We are going to redeploy. Again, we'll pull the latest images just in case there's been any updates to any of the others. It's always good to check. So there we are, we've deployed. So we're going to do our usual, and we're going to go to port 6868. And here is Profilarr. Now we're going to set up a username and password, which, as I've mentioned before, always good practice. Not going to save it. And here we are. So the way that Profilarr works is we're going to add basically a repository of profiles, and we're going to sync them to our radar and our sonar. So part of this version 2.0, which just released a couple of weeks ago, is you have the ability to connect to multiple databases. So the way this app is going to work, it's going to connect to these databases. It's going to pull through any updates to custom formats or qualities, anything like that. And then from there, you can choose which ones you want to sync over to radar and sonar. So personally, I quite like Dumpstar because it's got a little bit of mix of dictionary and trash formats. You can also just have the full dictionary and trash formats. You can do whatever you like, but I quite like Dumpstar. I also really like the name. So I quite like Dumpstar, so I'll be using that one. So I'm going to control click. I'm going to open that in a new tab because we will need that link shortly. And then I'm going to go over to our databases. So it comes with dictionary kind of pre-installed. But I'm going to go to this plus button. I'm going to add Dumpstar. I'm going to get that URL. I'm going to copy it and paste it into there. Leave it on the main branch. I'm not going to provide a GitHub access token. So for your conflict strategy, I just leave it on override because what this will do is it means that any of the profiles that come from Dumpstar will be overwritten. You can customize these profiles yourself if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty and you're a bit of a perfectionist, then you can do so, in which case you want to set it to ask. Or you can align it, and what that'll do is it will drop your local version and accept any changes from the source. Sync strategy, you can do every hour, you can do it manually. Every hour is probably a little bit overkill, so I'm just going to leave it on. I want to leave it on manual. This isn't the kind of thing you need to do consistently. And leave auto pull enabled so it can update when it needs to. So let's save. So it's queuing, and there we go. We've got our little Dumpstar with the great little dumpster fire logo. So we can see all the updates for this. There's conflicts. So if you've changed some profiles, there might be conflicts there. And then again, some settings if we ever need to change it for whatever reason. If you want to change the sync strategy or the conflict strategy, you can do so there. So let's connect our radar and sonar. So this will be the exact same as we did it on Bazaar if you saw last week's episode. So I'm going to do radar first. I'm going to get my local IP address, 192.168.1.5. Oh, 168. 169 is something totally different. 0.58. And it's 7878. And then I'm going to get my API key. Now, like I did last time, I'm not going to show you where to get this because it is secure. But if you go to radar, into settings, and then click general, your API key will be down here somewhere. So see you in a second. Okay, so once you've pasted in that API key, just come up here to type, and obviously we need to tell them it's radar because it will pull the radar profiles. and then we'll test the connection. All good, and we'll hit save. So there we have our Radarr instance. So we'll just do the same again for Sonarr, so feel free to pause the video and go and have an attempt on your own. So now we've set up our Radarr and Sonarr instances, we're going to actually synchronize some quality profiles. So we're going to head over to the quality profiles tab. So these are the dictionary ones that are built in. And then we've got our Dumpstar tab as well. Obviously, if you use trash guides or any other databases, they'll all be linked up here as well. So this is basically just giving you an idea of what these profiles contain and depending on your use case. So, for example, 1080p balanced, which means you get a nice balance of quality and size. So it's not going to completely eat up all your storage, but it's not going to be completely terrible quality either. You can see here you get some average movie sizes, 4 to 8 gig a movie, 2 to 4 gig an episode. I believe that's based on an hour-long episode. I think, don't quote me on that. And the same for obviously 1080p compact for if you're a bit more of a stickler for storage space, or if you are someone who wants the best of the best of the best, you've got the 2160p Remux, which has 40 to 60 gig a movie, 15 to 30 gig an episode. And if you've got that much space, well done to you, Jeff Bezos, because you're probably the only person who could afford to have that many hard drives. So the reason I quite like using Dumpstar is because we have some more kind of general profiles rather than just quality based. So we have this LQ 1080p, which it's called low quality. For the most part, I think it's perfectly fine, especially for shows that you're just checking out. The way I tend to do things is I use the LQ 1080p and the movies and TV 1080p. So things will start at low quality. If it's a movie and I think that movie was great, I want to keep that on my library until the rest of time, then I can change the profile and that will get me a better quality version. And if it's rubbish, it hasn't taken too much of my hard drive space. So what we can do is we can select the profile and it'll give us a bit more detail. So this profile is for Sitka, shit I don't care about, which is a great way to describe a lot of this. So you can get the scoring here. So this is to do with custom formats, which I'll go through in a bit more detail shortly. And then we also have our qualities tab. So this will basically, if you remember when we originally set up Radarr and Sonarr, we were able to tick and untick which ones we wanted. This basically does all that for you. If you want to customize this and then save it, you can do so. Obviously, that will cause a conflict with the database, but that's entirely up to you. So once you've had a play around with these, you can clone them, for example. So you can click this little button here. That'll create a clone, and you can make your own copy without affecting the base one, just in case you mess something up and you want a nice fallback. So we're going to jump over to our custom formats tab now. So custom formats are usually quite complicated, but with an app like Profilarr, it makes them a hell of a lot easier. So all they are is basically parameters to categorize different media. So you can see here we've got different tiers of release groups and things like that. And what it's going to do is when it searches for your movies, it's going to assign it different categories. Each category will have a score or a minus score. If you, for example, if you don't want any extras at all, you can set the extras score to minus 9999. And then you can say to Radarr, to Sonarr, if the score is below 1,000, don't even bother. And the same goes if you want different codecs, if you want the Hulu specific versions of downloads rather than TV rips, for example, or you want Netflix versions, anything like that, that is what custom formats are for. So these will all be synced over, and I'll show you how they work in greater detail when we get over to setting them up in Radarr and Sonarr. Now, for media management, we did set our naming conventions when we set up Radarr and Sonarr initially, but you can see in here, this is the dictionary default. So you can see that the movie will have the movie database ID, which edition it is, the surround sound, the Blu-ray, the HDR, the Dolby surround sound, what codec, and the release group. Obviously, if you don't want all of that, you can just get rid of it all and have whatever you like. So you can have a play around with this as much as you like. So if we check the Dumpstar configuration, that is pretty much the same. So for me, all I want is the movie and the release year, just to keep things nice and tidy. And then the movie folder itself, I don't want the ID on there. We'll replace illegal characters, and we'll leave smart replace on the colon replacement, and then I'm going to save that. Just so when this synchronizes, it's not going to cause any issues. And we'll do the same for Sonarr. So I don't like having the series title name in the file name itself. I don't need any of the custom formats or stuff. I just like having the episode title. Daily episodes and anime I don't tend to use, so I'll just leave them as default. And then for the folder format, I'm going to get rid of that TV database as well. For the season folder format, I like having this season :00 tag because it does a padded 0. So if I change it to a single digit, you'll see that it will say season 1. If I add that extra digit, it will be season 01. So if you've got something like The Simpsons or a show that's been running for a long time, I always just like that consistency. Multi-episode style, I just leave it on prefixed range. So if you have like a sitcom that might have a special episode or something where it's a 2-parter, it will name it as part episodes 1 and 2 or whatever it might be. And then we're going to replace any illegal characters and smart replace the colons. This is just in case we get a file that might have some characters in there which are causing issues with the renaming and that kind of thing. And then we'll hit save. So for delay profiles, I'm just going to use Dumpstar's default delay, and I'm going to set this I only use Usenet. So just going to save that. So now we need to synchronize them with our apps. So we're going to go to Radarr, and we can set our conventions based on what we've just looked at. So for my Radarr, my naming convention, I want the Dumpstar Radarr that I set up. The quality definitions, I'm going to use Dumpstar as well. The media settings, I'm also going to use Dumpstar. I'm going to use Dumpstar for all of it. Obviously, we have a manual trigger. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to synchronize it. So now that's synced, we'll do the same for... So the delay profile, we'll use just the default. For our quality profile, I'm going to use... We'll do LQ 1080p. I'll do TV 1080p. Movies 1080p. And we'll do 1080p high quality as well. What I tend to do is I'll have low quality as the default. And then, like I said, if I really like something, I can go in and I can manually upgrade the profile myself. Okay, so if I hit sync, it's synced the quality profiles. And then we'll do the same for delay profiles. And then we'll do the same for media management. And now, if we go over to Radarr, we should see, in our profiles, I've got my LQ 1080p, my movies 1080p, my 1080p HQ. So what I'll do is I'm just going to click and just remove some of these just to keep things nice and tidy. So I'm actually going to remove the TV 1080p because it doesn't actually make sense on Radarr. And then I'm going to remove this any profile, but if I try and delete it, I can't. And the reason is it's already assigned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my movies. I'm going to hit edit movies. I'm going to tick this little box to select all. I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to change the quality profile to movies 1080p. And then I'm going to hit apply changes. So now I've applied that across all my movies. I can go back to settings and I should be able to delete the any profile. Although it doesn't appear to be letting me. So probably a little bit of an issue, but nothing to worry about. It's cleaner than it was a moment ago. So custom formats. So if we jump into, say, low quality 1080p, this is how custom formats works. You can see here that we have a minimum custom format score. So in order for something to download, it must be above 0. We can have upgrade until the custom format score is 10,000. So obviously if you have loads, you can set the scores however you want. And then your minimum custom format score increment. So basically, if you get, for example, so you can see Dolby Digital here has a score of 1. So if it downloads a movie that has Dolby Digital, it'll assign it a score of 1. If it then finds one that says, hang on, I found one that's Dolby Digital Plus, because the increment is 1, then it will download the next version up. Obviously, if you don't want it to keep downloading on minor differences, you can say, right, 10. It will only download something when it says, hang on, I've got this X265 version here, or one of these Sidca's tiers, so I want to make sure that it gets that version. So I'm just going to leave these on the default. Most of these, and the great thing about these profiles is that the defaults are really, really good. But then you can customize them yourself. For example, if you want the Netflix rips of movies, you can come down to NF, which is Netflix, and you can go, right, assign that a score of 1,000. It's going to jump right up, and then I'll show you how they work. So I'm going to save that for now, and then if I go to, say, a movie, so I want to click into Zootopia 2, and you can click Interactive Search. And then once it loads, it's going to scan all my indexes, and it's going to see if it can find anything matching Zootopia 2. And you can see here we have these custom format scores. So obviously, so you can see some of them have this little red exclamation mark, which means that it will automatically be rejected. The reason being is custom formats, the 7.1 Atmos Dolby Digital Plus, have scores below the movie's minimum profile of 750. However, everything above it, it will pick one of these. And in terms of looking at the size, I'd say 8 to 9 gig for a 1080p movie is perfectly fine. So we can click on this library tab, and you can see a kind of nice overview of the current status of your movies that you've downloaded. There's also this drift feature, which seems to compare the configuration against the current synchronization. Don't really know too much about this, so I'll be skipping over it. Upgrades, this will search for better quality releases, although most of this is handled by Radarr and Sonarr, so I don't know how effective this actually is. And then you can automatically rename files and folders to match your naming format, although, again, Radarr and Sonarr will handle this. So we're finally just going to set up Sonarr. So for the naming convention, I'm going to use the Dumpstar versions of all these. Manual trigger, so we'll save and we'll sync. Delay profile, I'll just use the default. We'll sync and we'll save and sync. And then for quality profiles for Dumpstar, I'm going to use the LQ 1080p and the TV 1080p. So the reason I do both of these is if someone recommends a TV show to me and I'm a bit unsure, I'll go, okay, check it out. I'll get the low quality version, but it's still watchable because it's still 1080p. And then if it's great, I can upgrade it. So the way to do that is if I go to Sonarr and I can select a series, or you can just click into a series. And then you can press edit. And then from here, you can just change your quality profile to whichever one you want. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to sync it. And there we are. We're going to jump back over to Sonarr. And if I go to my settings now, our profiles, you can see I've got my low quality and my TV ones there. So I'm just going to do what I did a moment ago. Clean up some of these older ones because I won't be using them anymore. And then I'm just going to click select all the series I've got, and then I'll just bulk set them to LQ for now, and then apply the changes. I'll probably go through these at some point, and then some of my all-time favorite shows, I'll flip up to full 1080p so I can get the best quality for the best quality shows. And then once that's done, we can stop selecting. That was Profilarr. One app I definitely cannot live without in today's day and age, especially as someone who I like having a large library of media. I'm not too fussed if it's not 4K IMAX Ultra HD, but I do like a little bit of quality, so it's good to really be quite picky and choosy with my media. So if this helped you out, if you've got any suggestions, any comments, what have you been doing with your media stack? If you've gone off on your own path and found some apps that I might not have yet covered, please let me know in the comments below. If you've got any issues, questions, please drop a comment. As always, I'd appreciate a like. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll catch you next Sunday.